I was delighted to be asked if I would speak about a bee, because I've long been enthralled by bees personally, proof of which is actually a tattoo on my foot, which I won't awkwardly now put my foot in the camera. You just have to believe me that I got a tattoo about bees when I was 19. And it came from, I was reading a Victor Hugo novel at the time, and one of the lines he writes is, I follow the philosophy of instinct and of nature, ut apes geometrium, which is Latin for as the bees do geometry. And it spoke to me because I'd been at the time learning in a very amateur level about honeybees and really intrigued by how mysterious they are. The fact that they build these kind of, incredible, complex hexagonal architectural feats, and we don't know how they know how to do that. The fact that many different kind of members of the colony will have different roles. And I was intrigued by the idea of this like bee destiny, that how are they born and they know what their role is in the colony, and then then do that role so there's harmony within the group. I also recently learned, I was also really interested in the waggle dance. So the fact that they dance, the scout bee will dance out a map to the rest of the colony to find flowers or nectar or water. And I recently learned there's actually rogue bees, which are really interesting, which are the bees who don't follow the waggle dance. And by not following the waggle dance and going their own way, that actually helps the colony because, of course, it allows kind of, discovery. So I think of those a bit like probably the XR rebels. It was interesting doing the research for the bee in question tonight, which is the rusty patched bumblebee, Bombus affinis, because I realized actually, although I've had a lifelong obsession with bees, I knew very little about them and I knew very little about bumblebees. So I'll start off by saying that it turns out that there are hundreds of different species of bees, over 250 species of bumblebees. And the one I was asked to look into, so the rusty patched bumblebee. So sociologically, I find it also very interesting that like other bee colonies, it seems to be, and forgive me, scientists, if this is a really like anthropomorphic term to use, but it seems somewhat matriarchal. So the colonies are led by queens. The queens birth, and it's very, very gendered in an interesting way. The queens will birth the worker bees, and all of the worker bees are female. So the female worker bees will kind of, run the hive, feed the larvae, help them grow, and then at the end of the colony, they will then they'll birth the next generation of queens and also the males, and the males fly off, and their main purpose is to impregnate a queen from another colony to give birth to the next generation. So I found that kind of, just strange and fascinating. And also this interesting note I found in the research that in absence of a fruitful, fecund queen, aggression and violence between workers increases quickly. The other really important thing to say about bees is that we really, really, really need them. They're considered a keystone species in most ecosystems. They help with wildflower reproduction. They help create seeds and fruits that feed wildlife as diverse as songbirds, grizzly bears, and of course us. It turns out that 30% of our food is directly or indirectly dependent on pollination by bees, and pollinators are necessary for the reproduction of nearly 3/4 of the world's flowering plants and more than 2/3 of the world's crop species. Without insects, because of their role in decomposition, our world would be covered in dung, dead animals, and partially rotting vegetation. And in spite of how important they are, and I would argue what an important role they've played in the kind of human imagination of artists. I studied art history, and you see bees everywhere, from sculptures to paintings to coins. We've gotten to a position where they are critically endangered. So the rusty patched bumblebee has decreased over 80% in recent years. The estimate is around 87%. They historically lived in northeastern America and Canada, but their territories declined massively. And the last recorded sighting of the rusty patched bumblebee in Canada was in 2009. And unfortunately, that's a common story for many other bee species. In the UK, two species have already gone extinct, and a further 8 species are listed as endangered. And I think if you're interested in the reasons why, and also the really positive efforts that are being made to protect bumblebees, I would encourage going to the bumblebeeconservation.org, where you can learn how you might become a citizen journalist or support efforts to protect bumblebees, which, fantastically many people are doing. I think my final, and also think about organic, obviously, because pesticides are a massive threat to bee species. And that's maybe a small way we can help, I say in a very amateur way. I think my final note is thinking about scale. I've done conservation projects in the past to support the tigers, to support elephants. And of course, I absolutely love those animals, and I'm not choosing favorites here at all. But I think often when we think about conservation, and also where the funding goes in conservation, it often goes to big animals. And we forget about the tiny, tiny, tiny things. And I think if there's something that COVID teaches us, it's that actually the tiny things, the really, really, really tiny things, are so powerful, and that we shouldn't conflate size with power, and that we need these tiny creatures. Of 1.5 million species of animals that have been recorded, 1 million of those are insects. And my final thought, inspired actually by what Ben was saying about what we can learn from the tiger. I love that kind of analogy for taking the kind of the roar of the tiger to face the threats we have today. And I would also say, what can we learn from bees? You know, in terms of the way they work in communities, in terms of the rogue bees, I think they could be a great inspiration for us today. Thank you.